architecture and marine engineering. He has vast experience in the maritime field and has held numerous important positions in shipping and port state control. Under this capacity, he is managing a team of 30 project officers. The unit provides training to EU member states, enlargement countries, Paris MOU states, and European neighborhood beneficiary countries. It also provides technical, operational, and scientific advice and assistance to the European Commission and the member. Mr. George, floor is yours. Thank you in advance.
Thank you very much, Captain Mamuka. It's really a pleasure to be back after 6 years. And I have to say I'm quite impressed by the changes I have seen here in Batumi, but also the changes in the Maritime Administration, which shows your commitment towards the goal that you set up 7 years ago. So, as already said, I come from EMSA, European Maritime Safety Agency, one of the decentralized agencies of EU. EMSA was practically founded on the aftermath of numerous accidents, when there was a decision to reinforce at EU level maritime safety and maritime legislation, and through our founding regulation back in 2002, EMSA was established. Since then, of course, our founding regulation has been revised numerous times. The most latest one just almost a year ago with the Coast Guard package. And technical assistance and training is one of our core tasks. We are under Article 2.1 of our founding regulation obliged to provide training activities as well as to develop technical solutions and technical assistance to support the national capacity of member states, as well as to provide equal training and technical support to states applying for accession to the EU, to the European Neighbourhood Policy beneficiary countries, and of course to countries taking part on the Paris MOU, which extends beyond the EU domain or the European domain, having Russia and Canada as well. But what exactly is technical assistance? What exactly do we do? So we can divide our technical assistance, and it's also linked to the presentations we heard so far, to three main areas. Training activities covering, of course, the areas which fall under the competency of our agency, such as maritime safety, accident investigation, port state control, prevention of pollution from ships, as well as response to any accidents by ships or offshore activities, STCW, training of certification of seafarers, Maritime Labour Convention, and other EU and IMO international instruments. We also provide exchange of best practices, either through our own guidance notes, which are developed by dedicated project officers, and I can give some examples on the Sulfur Directive, the EU legislation going beyond MARPOL Annex 6 with respect to control of sulfur in fuels, port reception facilities, and most recently we have developed best practices on the inventory of hazardous material for the ship recycling regulation and the Hong Kong Convention. We are currently now working on a piece of guidance which will address also the industry, and it's very much related to the developments in port infrastructure. We are working on LNG guidance for port authorities, how to assess and approve the use of LNG as fuel in ports, doing all the necessary risk assessment and also the necessary infrastructure to ensure safety and security when using LNG as fuel. But we also provide technical solutions, which is very much linked to infrastructure as well. We have our own technical solutions which are offered to member states, but also to beneficiary countries, which are used by enforcement authorities to ensure uniform implementation of EU and international legislation, as well as to enhance cooperation between member states and third countries. These tools are a perfect example of cooperation. THETIS is a tool used by port state control officers throughout the EU, Russia, Canada, Norway, and Iceland, so it goes far and beyond the EU. THETIS EU is a tool which was designed to support enforcement authorities to implement EU legislation but it's going to be soon discussed to be open to accession countries and beneficiary countries of our projects, provided that they align their legislation with the EU legislation, and we're looking forward to the Sulfur Directive and the PRF regulations. RuleCheck, which is an electronic library where we have all the International Maritime Organization conventions, the ILO, MLC, all the EU maritime legislation, and specific folders which either address prostate control in the Paris MOU domain, or the Black Sea MOU, or the Med MOU. RuleCheck is currently used by 80 countries all over the world, not necessarily linked to any EU project. So we provide assistance to the Indian Ocean MOU, to the Caribbean MOU, and through RuleCheck, everybody has access to the same exact legislation and procedure to implement when inspecting ships. We have developed an e-learning platform, the so-called MAX, Maritime Knowledge Center, where we have e-learning modules which are developed by our project officer to address all international and EU legislation, and it's offered also to all beneficiaries of our projects. And of course, CleanSeaNet, which is currently also being used by beneficiaries in the Black Sea, where satellite images are provided in order to support the identification of potential pollution, but most importantly also the identification of potential polluters. Now, when it comes to the Black Sea, we are running now a project called Black and Caspian Sea project. We call it BCC. The project started on 1st February 2017. EMSA has full delegation and responsibility for the project. It will go up to 2021 for 4 years. We have 4 million euros planned, which are provided by DGNIR. And the project covers both regional, so the Black Sea, and bilateral actions to address beneficiaries' needs, because in some cases, some actions which will be tailor-made, for example, for Georgia, may not fit Ukraine and vice versa. The beneficiaries come both from the Black Sea and the Caspian region, namely Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Iran, Moldova, Turkey, Turkmenistan, and Ukraine. And it covers a large number of technical areas falling within the remit of our agency, such as flag state obligation and responsibilities, port state, VTMIS, protection of the marine environment, including also emergency response activities, human element in maritime safety, starting from ISM code all the way to STCW and MLC, and of course maritime security for both port and ship. We have challenges, of course, to meet, and we have divided them into 3 main areas. Maritime safety, of course, is the traditional, let's say, activity of the agency, and we have, of course, the challenge to implement the III code, and in that respect to support the beneficiary countries in drafting legislation and procedure to bring in line their legislation with the IMO standards. A big challenge is to provide training for flag state surveyors and port state control officers throughout the region, and to establish a harmonized approach, and that is why we are proud to say that we are now developing a standard training scheme for flag state surveyors and port state control officers to be implemented throughout the region for all the beneficiaries. It is important to establish a scheme to monitor the fleet performance, but also the classification societies, the ROs, that are delegated to issue statutory certificates on behalf of the beneficiary countries, and that's why we will develop specific trainings on monitoring fleet and RO performances. We will, of course, do other activities to reinforce the capacity building in the area of maritime safety, including training of accident investigators. We will, of course, provide full access to our tools, RuleCheck and e-learning. We will develop e-learning modules on the request of the beneficiaries, and, of course, we will bring experts from EU member states to share best practices with the beneficiaries, but also equally important to exchange best practices between the countries of the region. When it comes to maritime security, again, as I said, we will try to reinforce the capacity in this area. by providing workshops and training and share expertise between beneficiaries and EU member states. We will provide, of course, training to experts, both on the ship side, how to perform security inspection, but most importantly, and with all the developments we see now in port infrastructure, how to assess and certify security in ports, and of course to approximate legislation and enforcement to the EU standards. And finally, for the protection of the marine environment, we heard also this morning that there are a lot of actions ongoing, and one of them is to align the legislation of the regional in the region with IMO and EU standard, and this is where we try to play an important role by providing support on drafting legislation, but also training through e-learning and in-house for the environmental legislation. We will reinforce the capacity building in the field of oil spills detection and identification of polluters, providing and exchanging satellite AIS and terrestrial AIS information, as well as CleanSeaNet services, which is already running from the previous project. Sharing and expertise and best practices, organizing joint drills in the region with neighborhood EU member states, like we did in the past with Bulgaria and Romania. And of course, we will provide, as I said earlier, access to enforcement tools, in particular for sulfur enforcement and for PRF, provided, of course, that the beneficiaries will align their legislation to the EU standards, namely the Sulfur Directive and the PRF Directive.